Little women, here we come. Frida raised her fist over her head as I turned onto the island highway. When we got past Duncan, Frida spoke up and said, "Can I have your attention, everybody? You may have noticed by the itinerary that we were going to go on a walking tour of the murals in Chemainus, but due to disruptions, we've had to cut that so we can make it to the theater on time. But I have asked the driver to drive down the main street so you can see many of the murals." Chemainus is world famous for its murals. When the mill closed down, the town got into painting murals on the sides of the businesses downtown to become a tourist destination. I'm sorry we don't have more time to see them. "It's cold and damp out there," said Frida. "I, for one, am happy to do a drive-by." "Well, maybe we could come back in the summer," said Mary Lou. There was a complete silence on the bus. I figured the rest of the penny pinchers thought that this was a kind of a one-shot wonder. I mean, after all, they'd had to agree to take Irene with them in order to be able to afford the trip. Following Frida's instructions, I turned off the Trans-Canada at the first Chemainus exit, drove down to Chemainus Road, went left at the roundabout, and past the theater, and we immediately saw our first mural. There were gasps and amazement. "It's so big," said Mary Lou. "And so vivid," said Frankie. After that, I couldn't keep up with all the oohing and awing. I had to admit I was pretty impressed myself. I slowed down so people could get a good look at the murals. Fortunately, there wasn't much traffic. On Legion Street, we passed a 33-meter mural of a ship in the harbor, a logger balancing on a log, and a steam train picking up logs. By the time I turned onto Willow Street, we'd passed dozens of murals depicting people who had lived around Chemainus for thousands of years, plus people who had come from European countries and China and Japan. I pulled up in front of a local coffee house across the street from a mural depicting the telephone company in 1915. Two women in long skirts stood on the porch of a wood-framed house. There was a white picket fence, a bicycle leaning against the house, and a cat in the window. I kind of thought it was in the spirit of the penny pinchers. And they did love it. They all got out to take a picture of it. Then they decided that they wanted to walk the short distance from there to the theater. Bryce wanted to stay on the bus. I said, "No way." Jude wanted me to park in the town lot, but I wanted to park closer to the theater so I wouldn't have to walk too far after the show was over. I drove around and found a parking space on a side street that was about a block away from the theater. We locked up the bus and strolled over to the theater and sat in the lobby waiting for everybody else to arrive. Frida and Raven, with Bryce in tow, were the first to show up. Frida went directly to the box office and had a long conversation with the people. Then she put an envelope in her lap and motored over to us. "There's no way they're going to refund the tickets for Irene and Bunny," she said. "I'm going to give one to Bryce, and I'm going to try to sell the other one at the door. Raven, you and Bryce stay here." "Well, why don't you let me do that for you?" said Jude. "Because I have two things going for you that you don't. One, I was the top salesperson at our travel agency, and two, I'm in a wheelchair. Watch this." So we watched as Frida motored up to people coming in the door saying, "Excuse me, I have a ticket for sale at cost. Could you use it?" By the time Frankie, Mary Lou, and May arrived, Frida was counting her cash. Then we took the elevator up to the Playbill dining room where a huge buffet was laid on. Because Frida had made arrangements ahead of time, we had a table that was easy to get to and also out of the way of people going back and forth to the buffet. Frida got Bryce to walk in front of her holding her plate, and she would point to the things that she wanted to eat and tell him how much, and he filled her plate. I must admit, he did a good job. Then I forgot about them all when I got up to the table and saw the food. They had garlic mashed potatoes. I mean, so many choices. What to do? I took a piece of salmon with the Chardonnay sauce, and I got some of the dark meat off the turkey, and then I had the carver slice some roast beef onto my plate. There were salads too, but I don't get so excited about them. I was a happy person when I sat down to eat, and judging by the sounds around me, everybody had kind of perked up. I heard Raven ask Bryce how he met Kaylee, and he actually answered her. Jude raised her head to ask me if I'd seen the dessert table. May, Frankie, and Mary Lou actually ordered wine. It was beginning to feel festive. So this is kind of how I thought the trip was going to go, I said to Jude. See, Mavis, I told you it would be fine. Every year, the Chemainus Theatre does something special for Christmas. This year, they were doing Little Women. I was surprised it was a musical. Almost every scene had a song and a dance. And when Beth died, it was sad, but it wasn't a showstopper. And Jo has always been my favorite sister, and the actress who played her was really good. So when the lights came up, I think we were all pretty happy, at least, you know, the people who were our age, which was the majority of the audience. I saw Raven elbow Bryce in the side, and he woke up clapping. She grinned at him. Well, then in the elevator, we all admitted that we'd each had a bit of a cat nap during the play, but what can you expect after such a big meal? I left everybody in the lobby and I went to get the bus. I was glad for the walk in the fresh air. The night was dry and clear, and with a slight breeze brushing my face. Behind me, I could hear the murmur of voices and car doors slamming as the audience sorted themselves out. Once I was away from the theater lights, I could look up and see the stars glittering in the sky. There was that constellation again, the one I saw in the Island Harbor parking lot. What's its name? Some night at 3 a.m. I'm going to sit bolt upright in bed and say its name. I tore my eyes away from the sky and looked at the street. There weren't as many cars on it as when I'd parked, but the Dodge van that I'd parked behind was still in front of us. I could see the top of the bus over the van. It looked funny, but I didn't know why. Then when I hurried forward, I saw that the front tire was flat. Oh no, I thought, this is just what we need. Then I noticed that the back tire was flat. A chill shot through me. One tire happens. 2 tires, it's deliberate. Somebody did it. I rushed up to the bus. That's not all they had done. 4 tires. It looked like they had taken a drill to the side, an electric drill to the sidewall, because there were holes and little squiggly bits of rubber on the ground. I went around to the bus driver's door, and the window was smashed. Oh, they got in the bus. I went in the bus. It was a shambles. The seat, they'd slashed the seats. I say they because the seats on the passenger side were slashed with a knife, and the seats on the driver's side were drilled full of holes with little squigglies laying below them of upholstery. They'd upended May's knitting, and it looked like they'd kicked it around the bus. They took Bunny's sign off the side and tore it in two and put the bus sign over the wheel and stuffed the rest of the sign in the lift mechanism. I sat down on the driver's seat and I started to shiver. It had nothing to do with the weather. Who could do such a thing? An image of the City Slicker stair blew up in my mind. I was sure it was them. My mind stopped working. My teeth started chattering. I put my hand under my chin to close my mouth. I don't know how long I sat there like that, and then I thought, I have to go back and tell Jude and the others. My mind immediately cluttered with details and arrangements. I walked back to the theater dragging dread. The lobby was empty except for 2 people in the box office and our little group gathered in the corner. When they saw me come through the door, they all got up and started gathering up their things. Jude, can I see you a minute? I stopped about 15 feet from the group and forced her to walk toward me. She searched my face. What's wrong? The bus has been vandalized. How bad? She asked. Can we drive it? Oh, no way. 4 tires, the driver's window, and all of the seats. We're going to have to call the cops. There's going to be an insurance claim, big time. The space between her eyes furrowed up like a plowed field. She looked over at the group. They were looking at us. They knew something was up. What are we going to do with them? Well, I don't think they should see the bus. I mean, it's upsetting. It gave me the shakes. Well, I can deal with the bus, she said, and the cops, and the tow truck. Okay, I said, I'll take care of getting the penny pinchers back to Cowichan Bay. What are you going to do about the wheelchair, she asked. Good question. I looked over at Frida. Her face was gray and gaunt, way past her bedtime. You go talk to the box office people and see if they can help. I'll tell the penny pinchers that we've broken down and we're arranging for their transportation. You should have parked in the town lot, she said as she turned toward the box office. Thanks for your support, I thought, but I didn't say anything because I knew she'd have a comeback. I walked over to the group. They followed me with their eyes. The bus is broken down, I said, so we have to make arrangements to get you back to the hotel. Do you think we could get a taxi? Asked Mary Lou. I bet there won't be one with a wheelchair lift, said Frida. They're too expensive anyway, said May. I hear you ladies have had some bad luck. The man from the box office walked up to our group. We have room in our hotel and we would be happy to put you up overnight. It's fully wheelchair accessible, he nodded toward Frida. Frida said, that is very kind, thank you very much, but I really need to get back to the Ocean View because my aids and medication are there. Me too, said May. I'm a diabetic and my pills are there. Frankie and Mary Lou nodded. I realized that in this culture, probably everybody over 80 is on some medication. I see the problem, the young man said. He thought a moment. The Chemainus Healthcare Center has a van with a wheelchair lift and they have 24-hour staffing. I'll call them and see if they can help out. That would be perfect, said Frida. We watched his back disappear across the lobby. Thank you for saying that, Mary Lou said to Frida. I don't think I'd sleep a wink if I didn't have my night things with me. How bad is the bus? Frankie asked. I thought a little reality wouldn't hurt. The tires have been slashed, I said. Oh, how mean, said Mary Lou. Do you think it's those guys who are after the music box, said May? Well, I don't see why it should be, I said. But over Raven's shoulder, I could see Bryce's face and he looked quite nervous. Maybe he knew something about these guys that I didn't know. Well, lots of kids think it's funny to do things to school buses, said Raven. Well, that's true. There's a reason that Sam put barbed wire on top of the bus yard fence. The cops are here, said Raven. I looked out the lobby window. An RCMP cruiser had pulled up in front of the theater with its red and blue lights flashing, but no siren. A constable got out of the car and walked toward the theater. Jude came from the box office and met him at the door. She introduced herself and explained the situation. He looked over at our little anxious group. She explained that we'd all been in the theater at the time and hadn't seen anything, and she could provide all our names and details. He asked her some more questions, and then she came over to us. I looked around and noticed that us no longer included Bryce. Oh no, where the hell could he have gone? One problem at a time, I told myself. I focused on Jude. I'm going to go with the constable and show him the bus. You're all free to go back to the hotel when we can arrange transportation. She handed me a business card. This is the constable's number. Call me on my cell phone if you can't get transport or if you want to get a hold of me. I think this could take a while. What about the bus? I said. She ran both her hands through her hair. I have no idea when the RCMP are going to release it. She turned to Raven. Do you think you could get Clarence to take care of it? Raven said, I'll phone Wayne. He's still up and he can phone Clarence in the morning. Call Frida's cell phone number, I said to Jude. That way you can let me know what's happening. Good news, says the box office manager. The care center has an aide on tonight who can drive the van. She should be here in about 15 minutes. A sigh of relief swept through the group. Then they decided that this would be a good time to go to the washroom. So then I had time to look for the missing Bryce, but stroke of luck, I didn't have to. He walked out of the men's room and went over to the brochure rack. I went up to him and I said, "Do not disappear on me again. Do you hear me?" "I went to the washroom," he said. "Yeah, when the cops showed up. I am not dumb, Sonny, and don't you forget it." I went back and sat down in the lobby. A guy from the box office came up and asked me if he could get me anything. "No," I said, "you've already been wildly helpful." But have any other buses been vandalized when people have been in seeing the show? He thought a moment and then he said, "Not that I recall," he said. "I know that sometimes the cars in the hotel parking lot are broken into, but they're mostly looking for something to steal." This was not a theft thing. This was a scare the hell out of you thing. A van drove up to the front of the theater and a young woman in a Cowichan sweater and those thin cotton medical pants got out of the van and started walking toward us. My legs got cold just looking at her. "Hi, I'm Megan. I'm looking for somebody in a wheelchair who needs a lift back to Cow Bay." "She'll be here in a moment," I said. "They're just in the washroom." Frankie said she'd tell the penny pinchers that the van was here. They lined up in the hallway like ducks in a row and proceeded to the front door. Bryce went over and held it for them. Frida and Raven were at the end of the line. "I guess you're the one who needs the lift," said Megan. "You're a sight for sore eyes," said Frida. Megan went ahead and opened the door and lowered the lift. She also put out a small stool to help people step into the van. I climbed into the passenger seat and Bryce climbed into the side door last and slid it closed. "Do you mind if we go by the bus so I can get my knitting?" May asked. "No problem," said Megan. Oh, how wrong she was. "Oh, May, I can get your knitting for you. I can do it tomorrow. Right now we need to get back to the hotel." "Well, then it's on to Cow Bay and don't spare the horses," Frida said. Megan was a skillful driver and the highway was clear and they're practically deserted, so we made good time. Even so, by the time we got back to the hotel, Frida had drifted off and it took her several minutes to wake up and focus enough to drive onto the lift to come down. Under Mary Lou's direction, Bryce set out the stool and helped May and Mary Lou and Frankie out of the van. I asked Megan if she'd like a cup of coffee or something before she started back, but she said no, she had to go right back. They were short-staffed at night. Raven and Frida went right to their room without waiting. Mary Lou said she would go with Bryce to his room and make sure he got settled for the night. He was so pale, you could practically see right through him. I was sure he thought that the guys chasing him had done that to the bus. I did too. Well, let this be a wake-up call for him. I told May that when I talked to Jude, I asked her to get her knitting off the bus for her. I didn't tell her what condition it was in.